Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm really excited to bring you today's video. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Let's get started. Eldoria Kingdom was known for its lush valleys, deep blue skies, and untouched nature, all of which contributed to its breathtaking beauty. However, after years of peaceful days, the kingdom's inhabitants began to encounter strange events. Dark shadows, ruined villages, and failing harvests. These were the signs of growing disasters in Eldoria, events no one could fully comprehend. Legends whispered among the people for years. Once a curse fell upon the kingdom, and only the strength of a true hero could break it. Eleanor was a young woman living a simple life in a small village in the northern part of Eldoria. Known for her beautiful face and kind heart, Eleanor led a modest life, working the fields, cooking meals at home with her mother, and occasionally playing with the children in the village. However, lately, strange clouds had appeared in the sky, and eerie winds howled at night, disturbing the peace. The elderly villagers claimed to have seen mysterious figures in the dark, and the spirits of the people grew heavier with each passing day. One day, the village's most respected figure, an elderly woman named Violetta, called Eleanor for a secret meeting. Violetta was known for her deep knowledge of Eldoria's history and had spent years researching its past. Sitting down with Eleanor, Violetta looked at her with a mixture of fear and concern in her ancient eyes. "Eleanor," the old woman began, her voice trembling, "as you know, this kingdom has been under the influence of a curse for years. The curse has grown, swallowing villages, and now it's moving toward the entire kingdom. But there is hope. There is something only one person can do." Eleanor, eyes wide with disbelief, focused on the woman. "Something? What do you want me to do?" Violetta took a deep breath and spoke softly. "According to the legends, the salvation of the kingdom lies in your hands. You are the chosen one. Only you have the power to save Eldoria. But to find that power, you must retrieve the legendary sword." Eleanor had difficulty believing Violetta's words. She was just a simple village girl. Among the noble families who sought the throne, no one would ever consider someone like her as a savior. But in the depths of her heart, she felt there was truth in the woman's words, and she knew she needed to uncover that truth. Looking into Eleanor's eyes, Violetta continued, "It is said that the sword is hidden beyond the Sonmez Mountains in the sacred temple. Once, this sword protected Eldoria with its sanctity. But the curse began when we lost the sword. If you can find and wield it, you will not only save the kingdom, but you can also destroy the curse forever. But be careful, this journey will pull you into the shadows." Eleanor stood up, gathering her courage. "I will do whatever it takes to save this kingdom. When do I leave?" Violetta paused for a moment, then placed her hand gently on Eleanor's shoulder. "Prepare yourself. The journey will take you into the depths of darkness. But remember, you won't be alone. You will have friends by your side to protect you." Eleanor spent a sleepless night preparing herself. She packed a small bag with food, water, and most importantly, a map. The next morning, as the sun rose, she would meet the brave knight and wise alchemist who would accompany her on this quest. With Tristan, a courageous soldier, and Lysander, a learned alchemist, Eleanor set out. Tristan was a tall man with sharp eyes, always carrying his shield. Lysander, though elderly, possessed sharp eyes and a deep well of knowledge. Tristan's strong grip on his shield and Lysander's calm counsel would provide her strength on the road. However, the shadow hunters chasing them would make their journey far more difficult, filled with dark creatures and betrayal. For the first time in her life, Eleanor was embarking on a true mission. Though she knew the dangers that lay ahead, she had to do what was necessary to save her kingdom. She carried with her the remnants of ancient legends and magic. As she advanced toward the sacred temple, she had to remain prepared for whatever might come her way. The shadow of the curse and the legend itself grew heavier with each step. Eldoria's last hope rested on the shoulders of one woman. As Eleanor, Tristan, and Lysander left the village in the north of Eldoria, the first light of dawn slowly crept over the valley peaks. At the moment they set out, Eleanor's initial fear, and indecision began to ease, though she still had no idea what dangers lay ahead. The journey had to be a beacon of hope, not just for her, but for all of the kingdom's people. Carrying this hope in her heart, she took her first steps into the depths of the dark forests. Tristan, the brave warrior from the village, was a formidable presence. With short black hair and sharp eyes, he was always calm and attentive. His broad shoulders and strong arms marked him as a true soldier. However, he was also a brave and protective friend. Tristan always reassured Eleanor, making it clear that he was ready to defend her at any moment during their dark journey. Lysander, despite his age, carried a calm and deep wisdom. His long white beard and sharp aged eyes revealed that he was a master alchemist with years of knowledge. He wasn't just an alchemist who understood the language of nature. He also possessed deep knowledge of ancient magic and manuscripts. Throughout their journey, he wasn't just a guide, but a source of security as well. In the early days of their journey, things were quieter. The northern forests, dense with trees, had an unusually cold air. Their travels were occasionally filled with deep silences. The sounds of nature, the wind dancing through the leaves, the soft cries of birds were the only noises to break the stillness. At the end of their path, beyond a hill, lay a vast forest they would need to pass to reach the Sunmez Mountains. Before entering the dark forest, Eleanor started to feel an uneasy sensation in her stomach. Something was wrong. She immediately turned to Lysander. "There's something, I can feel it," Eleanor said, her voice trembling. Lysander stared into the depths of the forest, remaining silent for a moment. Then, taking a deep breath, he replied, "Yes, Eleanor, a dark force is awakening within this forest. But you must be careful. When the balance of nature is disturbed, dark creatures are born. Shadows may be on our trail." Tristan briefly glanced behind and readied his shield. "We must be brave enough to protect ourselves," he said. Eleanor nodded slowly, gathering her courage. Perhaps she wasn't strong enough to protect herself, but she was determined to continue her journey. For the sake of her kingdom's salvation, she had to face every danger. In her mind, she constantly thought about what it meant to be a hero. A hero is someone who can face their fear, she thought. As they ventured into the dark forest, the air grew colder and more oppressive. The trunks of the trees twisted in strange shapes, reaching toward the sky like eyes watching them. With each step, a dark silence and a terrifying atmosphere settled in. Moonlight barely filtered through the dense trees, and everything seemed to disappear into shadows. Suddenly, a low growl from the depths of the forest caught the attention of the trio. They exchanged glances, and Lysander gently tapped his staff on the ground. "These are shadow hunters," he said. "Dark creatures dwell in this forest. They will try to block our path." At that moment, a silhouette swiftly appeared between the trees. A dark, formless creature moved silently, its speed too fast for a normal human to track. Its eyes glowed red like fire, and its teeth were sharp, resembling those of a wild predator. Tristan immediately drew his shield and braced himself. Lysander cast a magical light from his staff and directed it toward the creature. These enemies can attack not only physically but mentally as well. "Be cautious," he warned. The creature suddenly leaped into the air and focused its gaze on Eleanor. The dark creature's purpose was to create fear and uncertainty, and thus, Eleanor's courage became their target. She began to feel the strength inside her. As she locked eyes with the creature, she sensed the evil in its deep, dark gaze. In that moment, something inside her stirred. It was a powerful feeling, a deep instinct, an awareness. Drawing from the power she had consciously discovered within herself, she began to step toward the creature. Tristan charged at the creature with his shield raised, striking it with a powerful blow. Lysander struck the ground with his staff, releasing a wave of magic. The creature froze for a moment under the magic's effect, but soon it resumed its attack. Eleanor, at that moment, completely eradicated her fear. She could feel the power of nature itself. Against a creature resisting magic, she found a force within her own soul, drawn from deep inside. Slowly, she raised her hands into the air. A beam of light shot from her eyes, dazzling the creature and forcing it to retreat. As the creature pulled back, Eleanor's light grew brighter. In that moment, the creature disappeared entirely. It only seemed to vanish for a moment, but in reality, something much larger was beginning. Lysander and Tristan, watching in shock, moved closer to Eleanor. Lysander said, I've never seen such power before. The potential within you is immense, he said. But this is only the beginning. The real journey starts now. Tristan, placing his shield back in its holder, added, If you can do this, greater dangers await us. Eleanor turned her gaze toward the deep, dark forest, pushing aside her fear, and said resolutely, These are merely the first obstacles I will encounter on my path. No stepping back, she said. And so, Eleanor continued her journey, stronger than before as she passed through the dark forest. But this was only part of her journey. The road to the Sonmez Mountains was filled with even greater dangers and unknowns. As Eleanor, Tristan, and Lysander made their way deeper into the dark forest, their journey became more and more complex. The attacks of the shadow hunters were only the beginning of their trials. With each passing day, the dangers around them grew. Yet Eleanor's hidden power began to surface, providing her with the courage she needed to keep moving forward. Now they were facing an even greater threat. As they approached the difficult passages they would need to cross to reach the Sonmez Mountains, the air began to change. It grew colder, and dark clouds slowly gathered in the sky. The howling wind at night seemed to foretell an approaching evil. This was no longer a simple journey. It had become part of a prophecy stretching beyond time itself. With the first light of day, Lysander walked ahead of the group, his steps causing magical symbols to rise from the ground, illuminating the night. His deep knowledge allowed him to understand the spirits of rivers, mountains, and forests. Yet even he was unsettled by the strange interplay of light and darkness that reflected in the sky, casting an eerie shadow over their path. Eventually, they reached a region known as the Dark Pass. This was a place where they would face both physical and spiritual trials. I must know this area well, Lysander said, signaling the group to stop. According to legends, the Dark Pass is where both fates foretold in the prophecy will be decided. It's hard to predict what we'll encounter here, but dark creatures and ancient powers guard this pass. Tristan, slinging his shield over his shoulder, looked at the Dark Pass. Then, if we must pass through this area, we must do our best, he said, his voice firm and resolute. As the leader of the group, Eleanor, though uneasy, drew strength from their courage. Let's keep going. If we can get through here, we'll be very close to the Sonmez Mountains, she said. There was a growing feeling inside her. It was as if this pass wasn't the end, but the beginning of everything. The group continued, on their way. As they neared the entrance of the Dark Pass, everything began to change. The air grew heavy and cold. The sounds from within the forest became deeper and more terrifying. The dark trees seemed to move like watching eyes, and shadowy figures appeared to be waiting for them. Many who had passed through this pass never returned. They were either lost or, worse, transformed by the darkness. However, Eleanor had found a power and awareness within herself. Her mission wasn't just to save the kingdom of Eldoria, it was also to decipher the mystery of this dark place. During their journey, Lysander tried to protect them from the dark spirits by using his magic to light their way. Yet something had begun to affect them. With each step, they felt as though their very souls were slipping away. Every mist they encountered, every fading light felt like an omen of something lost. They made a stop at an ancient temple ruin in a settlement where they hoped to pass the night. The temple, long forgotten and abandoned, still held a great power. Within, Lysander examined the area around the temple. There is something here, an ancient magic that guards the pass. Something must awaken in this temple, he said. But we must be careful. As Eleanor ventured deeper into the temple, the sense of discomfort inside her grew. Taking a deep breath, she began to feel her power more strongly. In the center of the temple, she noticed an ancient stone book. The book contained writings by the mages who once lived there and had protective spells within. This book's writings are ancient, Lysander said, touching the pages. These symbols were used to awaken the powers of this temple. We need to understand what happened here. Suddenly, the pages of the book began flipping rapidly on their own, and a burst of light erupted. Lysander took a step back as a vibration started in Eleanor's chest. The light inside her began to change something. In that moment, a phrase from the book caught her eye. It reminded her of something forgotten. The prophecy, she muttered. Surrounded by infinite darkness, something became very clear to her. A voice inside her said, "The one who takes the sword will either save the kingdom or be trapped in eternal darkness." This was part of the prophecy. The fate of a sword depended on its reaching the right hands. But this sword could also signal death. Suddenly, the temple began to shake from all sides. Stones fell and walls cracked. It was clear that the group had to get out immediately, but just as they were about to leave, a dark figure appeared. Taking shape from the shadows, it became a solid form. It was the guardian of the pass. As Eleanor stepped forward toward the dark figure, Lysander and Tristan tried to provide defense behind her. "Don't face it alone, Eleanor," Lysander shouted, but Eleanor, feeling the power awakening inside her, stepped forward fearlessly. The dark figure's eyes were fixed on her, and for a moment, it felt as though she was the only one in the world. Confronting it could change Eleanor's destiny. She needed a few more seconds to make her decision, but to slow down time, something was needed. At that moment, the light inside her shone brighter than ever. And for the first time, Eleanor truly felt the power of the sword and was ready to face the darkness. The group had left the challenges of the dark pass behind and, after a long journey, finally reached a region near the summit of the Sunmez Mountains, where the legendary sacred temple stood. Tired but resolute, they walked toward the temple's door, but the air around them suddenly shifted. The dark silence of the night slowly began to hum. The temple seemed to hold the mystery of centuries past, and the darkness outside hinted at the depth of the secrets within. As Eleanor, Tristan, and Lysander approached the temple, each of them felt a different emotion, and the echoes of their footsteps seemed to suggest the spirits of those who once lived there were watching them. The stones of the temple were ancient and covered in moss, but beneath them was magic. The grandeur of the temple, combined with the dangers that awaited inside, affected each of them in different ways. "This place, it's really ancient," Lysander said, carefully looking around. "And no matter how careful we are, everything we feel here is shaped by magic. This temple is not just a building, it contains time itself." Tristan gripped his weapon tightly, scanning every corner with care. "Then we must be cautious. This place feels too strange." Eleanor stepped forward into the dark temple. Once inside, she felt as though she had entered a different world. The large stone pillars inside cast long shadows, and ancient symbols and writings traced the walls. The sacred space, which felt like an open courtyard, carried the marks of not just time, but also power. With every step, Eleanor felt a deeper sense of power. The temple was divided by a corridor. The path on the right led to a passage overrun with yellowed leaves and moss, while the left path was brighter, yet just as mysterious, leading to a door. Lysander insisted on choosing the left path, knowing that an ancient ritual had passed through the right one. Although Eleanor was curious about the reasons behind his choice, she trusted Lysander's knowledge and followed him. As they entered, something began to change in the temple. Suddenly everything grew silent, and from the depths of the temple's heart, a faint rustling sound rose. The ancient stones, as if awakening, emitted a mystical vibration that intoxicated the air. When Eleanor felt this vibration, she realized that something deep inside her was stirring. The deeper they went, the more she was drawn in. "Eleanor, this place knows you." Lysander suddenly raised his voice after the silence. "This is a place meant only for those of royal blood, and with each passing day you're realizing that you are that person." These words both excited and terrified Eleanor. Everything around her seemed to signal a call she had never heard before. At that moment, a light appeared in the temple. The light shone on the walls like ancient runic symbols, as if guiding them toward a path. Following the source of the light, they found a door to a room. The door was covered in ancient symbols and stood solidly. It was not only a physical barrier, but also seemed to signal a trial. After walking around the door for a while, Lysander approached and murmured something in an ancient language. The door slowly creaked open. Once inside, their eyes were drawn to the center of the room. In the room stood a large stone table on a high platform. On the table was a massive ancient sword. The sword radiated some sort of energy into the air, and with each passing second, the air in the room grew denser. The light surrounding the sword seemed like proof of the power it emitted. The sword almost appeared alive. When Eleanor saw the sword, she felt her heart race. The sword was not only physically grand and impressive, it held something inside, traces of an ancient power. Lysander stepped forward. "This sword, it's yours," he said. Eleanor hesitated for a moment, but the voice inside her told her that she couldn't complete this journey without taking the sword. The power within her pushed her toward it. Slowly but determinedly, she moved forward to grasp the sword with her hands. However, just as she was about to take it, a sudden noise erupted in the room. Her eyes noticed a change in the atmosphere, filled with dark figures. At that moment, the silhouette of an ancient wizard, the guardian of the temple, became distinct. The wizard appeared in a long robe, with lights shining in his hands. "This is no ordinary place," the wizard said, his voice carrying both wisdom and warning. "This sword can only be wielded by one who has a pure heart. Only the purity of your heart can give you the sword." Eleanor looked into the wizard's eyes, feeling the power awakening within her. "Am I ready to take this sword?" she asked. The wizard shook his head. "Taking this sword is not only about power but also about great sacrifice and responsibility. Do you have the heart that carries this power but also the strength to resist it?" Eleanor took a deep breath. At that moment, something became clear in her mind. This journey would not only be a test for Eldoria, but for her to overcome her own fears, powers, and uncertainties. The Guardian's gaze not only served as a warning from the outside, but also granted her an inner awareness. Her heart had to remain pure, but the dark thoughts and worries inside her kept trying to challenge her. She saw a brief moment of doubt in the wizard's eyes, but as she slowly grasped the sword, the world seemed to fall silent. The sword echoed in her heart, like a reverberation. In that moment when she felt lost in the past, she found herself again. And as light rose from the temple, it illuminated the surroundings while Eleanor's fate began to slowly take shape. This was only the beginning. When Eleanor exited the sacred temple, the sword she held illuminated the surroundings like a source of light. However, this light was not just a brightness cutting through the night outside the temple, but a reflection of the power it contained. With each step, the feeling that the sword was whispering to her grew stronger. As the darkness approached them, like an unsolved mystery hidden in the depths of the temple, their minds were filled with a heap of questions. But the biggest question was how Eleanor would overcome the fear in her heart. "We've taken the sword, but what do we do now?" Tristan asked, vigilantly surveying their surroundings. The magical light of the sword was becoming less visible with each passing minute. In the dark, "Lord Mordecai's army is still here, isn't it?" Remembering the ancient texts, Lysander replied, "Yes, it's still a threat. Mordecai is slowly enveloping the kingdom in a curse, but this sword, it may be the only solution to his powers. However, confronting him without understanding how to use the sword's power would be suicide," he said. As Eleanor held the sword, she tried to feel its power. Among the slowly glowing leaves of the sword, it seemed to have a spirit. A kind of warmth encouraged her to use the power, but to do so responsibly. However, the doubts in her heart grew. Using this sword could not only affect Mordecai but also everything close to him. As they continued on their journey, a feeling emerged as if enemies were watching them, hidden in the dark shadows. In her mind, everything related to Mordecai's power swirled, like an unresolved maze of questions. The group's steps seemed to cross paths with a great darkness waiting for them. One night, they began descending into a valley. In the dark corners of the valley, shadowy movements were frequently observed. They could feel that danger was approaching quickly. At that moment, a call rose in Eleanor's mind. Her eyes noticed a dark figure moving through the valley. "Be careful. That shadow, it could be one of Mordecai's agents," Lysander warned, muttering an incantation to prepare a protective spell. Suddenly, a dark figure emerged rapidly in front of the group. Its eyes glowed with a terrifying coldness, holding a large dagger. Though its face was not fully visible, the coldness and evil within it were immediately felt. The shadow attacked in an instant, swinging its sword rapidly. Eleanor raised her sword quickly to defend, but it seemed to be pulling toward her, trembling with its power, trying to resist the attacks of the dark figure. The figure was frightening and powerful, but as Eleanor became aware of the silent strength within her, she felt that the sword would help them. Lifting the sword, she deflected the enemy's strike. The power within her grew. The sword, as it merged with her hands, created an energy explosion that sent the enemy flying backward. However, this was just the beginning. It was clear that the shadow figure was immortal, capable of resurrecting itself over time. This creature, nourished by Mordecai's power, had the ability to come back to life. The group continued to move quickly. However, Mordecai's games were following them. In the valley where they spent the night, they woke to a rustling and whispering sounds. The darkness was sharpening with each passing moment. Then, from the shadows, a laugh was heard in the distance. It was not just the laugh of a shadow creature, but the very laugh of Mordecai. Mordecai had finally begun to watch them. "You're coming with me, aren't you?" Mordecai's voice echoed from the depths of the valley. "I can feel your fears, I can feel them. Do you really think you can fight me with this sword? You hold a power you don't even understand yet." Eleanor lifted her head, continuing to hear the voice. Every word seemed to create a dark thought in her heart. The sword felt as though it was showing her the truth, but this journey required not only overcoming her own fears, but also taking on a much greater responsibility. After the dark figures followed them, Mordecai waited for the group to delve deeper into the darkness. He was not merely a being, but a godlike, deeply powerful entity. He possessed such profound power that his desire to conquer all of the Eldoria kingdom contained millennia of wisdom and darkness. Eleanor, balancing both her power and fears, gripped the sword tighter, realizing that this battle was not only a physical fight but also a spiritual struggle. Slowly, yet determinedly, the group moved forward, preparing to face Mordecai. The fight against darkness was not just an external war. It was about facing the darkness within and overcoming it. During this time, as Mordecai's plans to lead his army came to fruition, Eleanor's journey moved forward toward facing the darkness for the future of Eldoria. Holding the sword in her hand, Eleanor took the final step to confront the darkness. The sword's magic gave her strength, but with every step she felt a weight. Lord Mordecai's power was growing with each passing moment. He was planning to curse the kingdom and plunge Eldoria into his dark dominion. However, despite this frightening threat, Eleanor had never felt her power so strongly. The sword's light gave her courage, but the anxieties in her heart were rapidly growing. Mordecai's power was no simple evil. With every step, the darkness accumulated over years was becoming more apparent. As they continued their journey, they were approaching the final stage of their mission. The group was only a few days away from the capital of Eldoria. After the sacred temple, their journey had become even harder. Mordecai's shadow hunters continued to attack them at every turn, but this time something had changed. Eleanor realized that there was a hidden power within her, and this power could bring her not only a physical victory, but also a spiritual one. After a few days of travel, the group reached the foot of the snowy mountains of Eldoria, but Mordecai was waiting here with an army to stop them. As the distance between them closed, a cold, dark air surrounded them. Yet Eleanor, trusting in the sword's shining light, continued to move forward with courage. A voice inside her seemed to show her the way. This sword was the reason she had been chosen, and no matter what, this journey had to come to an end. The capital of Eldoria was under a dark siege. The people in the city were fighting for survival against Mordecai's army. However, Eleanor realized that there was no turning back. They could not save Eldoria without winning this war. As Eleanor and her friends approached the city's high walls in a way no one had dared before, they finally reached the city's fortifications. Mordecai's dark army surrounded the walls of Eldoria, wrapping the city in a dark veil. The people in the city were desperately resisting. However, this was only the beginning for Mordecai to secure his victory. Mordecai was on the verge of taking the city forever. But then, something changed unexpectedly. Eleanor, holding the sword, felt that she knew exactly what she needed to do. The unrest in the city felt like a sign that the sword's power was awakening the secrets buried deep within her heart. Eleanor noticed that the light of the sword was intensifying. With each passing second, the sword released another burst of power, slowly pushing back the dark army behind it. This light was not just a physical glow, it was also awakening the ancient spirits of Eldoria. It had the effect of resurrecting the old kings, ancient guardians, and the symbols of Eldoria's powers. Mordecai's dominion was about to end. However, all this power came with an inner struggle. As Eleanor gripped the sword more firmly, she began to struggle with controlling it. The darkness within the sword was pulling toward her. Mordecai seemed to be trying to mentally surround her. She could hear his voice constantly manipulating her to reinforce the evil in her heart. "Don't dare use the sword. You can't bear this power. The kingdom will be mine, once again. You are just a tool." With each word, Eleanor felt as if she was stepping back another pace. But in that moment, Lysander's voice came to her like a light. "Eleanor, don't trust the power of the sword. It's just a tool to bring out the light that's within you. The darkness will not surrender to you, but you must not surrender to it." These words echoed in Eleanor's mind. The struggle to control the sword's power pushed her spirit, leading her to discover her true inner light. In that moment, a solution appeared in her heart. She directed the sword's light toward Mordecai and decided to release the power within her with a pure will. The power of the sword was now not only helping her fight the darkness, but also giving her the strength to unite with Eldoria's past. As she did this, the ancient spirits and guardians of the city appeared to support the power of the sword. And Mordecai, faced with this combined strength, began to retreat. Eleanor, using the sword's power one final time, destroyed Mordecai forever. This was not only the end of a war, it was the end of an era. Eldoria was stepping into a new age. A city freed from the dark threat, the kingdom was being reborn. The people regained their freedom, but Eleanor's inner peace was just as deep. In her mind, the future of Eldoria and the responsibility of the sword's power weighed heavily. However, for her, the real battle was not just against physical enemies, but also with the darkness within herself. As the people of Eldoria began preparing for a new beginning, Eleanor and her friends had not only won a victory. The peace at the heart of the kingdom would be shaped by the struggles they had left behind, and the future of Eldoria would belong to them. This was the story of not just a victory, but the rebirth of an entire nation.